Hello, and welcome to another edition of Coffee Talk with immigration attorney Brian D. Lerner. In this particular episode, I'd like to talk a little bit about derivative citizenship and obtaining citizenship even though you're not born in the US. And essentially, I'd like to cover what has occurred with Trump issuing an order that children born of military personnel overseas are no longer going to be considered US citizens and what can be done about that. Now, first of all, um, this particular order that he issued, number one, can be fought up and down in the courts. And let me tell you why. First of all, it is not an executive order which created the citizenship provisions of military personnel. It is actual law under the Immigration and Nationality Act, which was previously passed by both houses of Congress and previously signed into law by a former president of the United States. Now, given that it is not just a regulation, it's not just a statute, but it is actual law, which went through all the bells and whistles and hoops to become law. The question then becomes whether a president can simply issue an executive order to erase that law, to make it so it doesn't exist. And the answer to that question is a clear and resounding no. There is no possible way that Trump would have the authority to issue an executive order saying, okay, I am going to ignore Section 322 of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which was formally passed by Congress, signed by a former president of the United States, and make it so that doesn't apply anymore. That cannot be the way that laws are no longer effective. It's not even a gray area. It is a complete contradiction of the current law. Okay, and there's a difference whether, for example, an order might have been given to clarify a certain portion of the law if it was gray, or to carve out maybe a little exception. There's some issues with that, but to completely say essentially that law is no longer law through an executive order, that is basically approaching dangerous ground. What if any law you can think of that is current law is simply thrown in the garbage because the president doesn't like it or the president wants his own agenda? That's why they have the whole separation of powers. That's why they have the whole way of making laws. If the president could just do that, what's the purpose of making a law in the first place? What's the purpose of both houses of Congress debating back and forth and getting a bill that agrees among them and then getting it to the president to sign? What would the purpose of that be? So if Trump wants to make it so that children born outside the United States to military personnel no longer fall under INA Section 322, then he needs to go to Congress and he needs to say, I don't want this to be law anymore. I don't want these children to be considered U.S. citizens anymore. And then it would need to pass the House, it would need to pass the Senate, and then he would need to sign it. And the reason he doesn't do that is because obviously the House is democratically controlled, and there's no way on this earth that they're going to pass such a law. And then even if it were in the Senate, it would appear that the majority of the Republicans do not want to take away the right of people serving our country, having their children not be considered U.S. citizens, because in their service of duty, which brought them outside the United States, they're basically being penalized. So I would urge anyone who's in the military who falls under this provision of law and who thinks that their child is going to not be a U.S. citizen because of what the president has ordered, you need to take that to court. Okay, it has to go to court, because If it doesn't go to court, then again, a very dangerous precedent is being set where a president can simply attempt to overturn a law he doesn't like without it really being overturned, without it going through Congress, without a repeal of that law happening. So, there's certain things that are gray, and that the lawyers will make good arguments, and you throw it up in the air how it's going to go. But when you have such a clear abdication of the process of law, um, you can't just let this sit. So go ahead, give my office a call. I'll let you know what can be done. Get this into federal court, so that we can get the passport issued for your child under this section of law, and then we'll go from there. So if you like the video, click like, subscribe, and more on the coming videos. Thank you.